Good morning. So the theme for this month is the power of spirit. And Centers for Spiritual Living, the theme they're using is the power of mind. But I really want us to be clear that mind is an avenue, a vehicle of spirit, but the power is spirit. And our theme for today is taking it personally. Thomas Troward, our a New Thought pioneer, said we can never get away from being the center of our own spiritual life. That we are the center of our own spiritual life. We can never get away from that. That when we leave here today, whatever we experienced here today as a community with Jack's music or with the reading, no matter what happens, we feel connected with everybody, but when we leave with our own experience. It's our experience. We may interpret what someone else's experience is. We may interpret what they're thinking, but that's just our mind interpreting. But ultimately what we leave with is our own experience. We are the center of our own spiritual experience. So God is infinite. God is in, through, and as all creation. It is in through every atom and cell. It is through all the galaxies upon galaxies upon galaxies, and it is beyond all of that. It is eternal. It is all the past and all the present and all the future and beyond all of that. And yet the only way we can experience that is within us. The only way we experience the divine is within us, and so we cultivate that interior awareness. Now that doesn't mean we don't ever feel something externally. So if we are in nature and we suddenly feel the awe of the presence when we're in nature or with an animal. I've certainly had some mystical experiences where my focus was external to me, on a statue or an idea or an image. But even then, and what you'll find is that even then, even if it starts off external, it becomes one with us. It moves towards us and it fills us. That the only way we even experience the divine externally is within us. And what's beautiful about this is that there's no intermediary. We don't need a teaching. We don't need any philosophy. We don't need a teacher. We don't need a book to do anything with this experience. That we have direct contact always available to us in every moment. That the power and the presence and the purity and the wholeness and the perfection of God is right where we are right now. There'll be no more presence of God in an hour from now than there is right now. There'll be no more presence in the power of God there wasn't just an hour ago or when Jesus was alive or when Buddha was alive. That all that God is always right where we are. We have always been one in, through, and as God. So we take it personally by acknowledging it, by showing up to this presence, by being aware of it, by cultivating our own interior stillness to listen. It doesn't mean we can't use words to help us. So for instance, when I read a book, especially a spiritual book, we can read books for information. Here are new ideas. I want to understand the new ideas. But we can also read spiritual books to transform. The intention of reading something is to transform. So as we are reading it, we're not rushing to get information. Do I understand this concept? Do I understand this idea? It's like fingers pointing at the moon. It's a Zen statement where ideas or teachings are fingers pointing at the moon. It's never the moon itself. So whatever ideas we are learning about, no matter how wonderful they are still just fingers pointing at the moon. So we read them or learn them, whether it's from a teacher, and then we allow ourselves to sit still with them and say, how is this true for me? And sometimes that's easy to do because it's so clear in the reading of where it's pointing to. But we have to take the time to listen and to be still, because where do we find God? Not in those words, not in the concept, not in the idea, but in a direct contact inside of us. And this also becomes our place of power. Because now no one has power over us, because you don't get to tell me what's true until I found out for myself. And the only way I can find out for myself is to listen. And so we can do it with something like there's only one power, one presence, and we can read that and say, yeah, I know that. But can I just sit down and really say, do I know that? Do I really know that there's only one power and there's one presence? In this moment, can I experience that? And then we can even... in a spiritual leadership class this week, we're talking about quadrants. it's a very theoretical thing, and yet I was reading it so slowly. When I first read it, I actually stopped, and I experienced all life arising as 4 quadrants, like it became from theory or concept into a direct realization. That anything we read, if we always, so the question is intention. In fact, when I was asking the kids up here what their intention was, I meant to turn also and ask you all, do you have your intention for today? Because the intention is, am I here to just get information, or am I here to transform, to just take maybe a word or a phrase or a song? It doesn't have to be the whole service. Is there something that I can take that takes me a little bit deeper, that helps me listen a little bit more, that helps me, so am I listening to shift my perception, to awaken a little bit more? Am I trying to get information? Am I going to walk out of here with more information than when I arrived? More information can be fun, it's playful, that's of the mind, and that's also can be good. We learn things so our idea of what's possible can expand. You know, I shared the story where I had an out-of-body experience, but I had no concept of what was happening. So it wasn't until years later that I was reading about Zen that I could think about it. Like, I had no way to even think about it. So concepts can help us interpret spiritual experiences. There are many people who have spiritual experiences long before they have an understanding of what they're experiencing. I certainly have had that in my life, and I'm sure many of you have had that, where you've had the experience, you're like, well, what was that? What did I just experience? And so sometimes through reading books, we start interpreting it, and that helps us integrate. But the point is the experience is not caused by, the experience can only come from spirit. The understanding can come from our head. The concepts can come from our head, and that can be a limitation, or it can be an expansion. The way we use it as a limitation is, it's like Shunryu Suzuki, I've mentioned before, when people came to learn meditation, he wouldn't let them read about Buddhism. Because what would happen is they would start meditating with an expectation of, this is what I should be experiencing, and that was an immediate limit. So even now, when we know the power and the presence and the love of God is right here, right now, we might say, okay, I want to experience it. I should be experiencing something. But I can say for myself that any dramatic experience that I've had, good and bad, mystical, big, beautiful mystical experience, or I'm down in the dumps and miserable, they're all passing. That the power and the presence of God, it doesn't pass. It doesn't come and it doesn't go. It's not like an experience that I have and then ends. It's always there. So what happens? So what does that mean? It's the most natural experience. That's why people don't know they're experiencing God, because we're waiting for something dramatic to happen, but it's not dramatic. God's always here. God's right here in this room right now in this moment, and the key is to be present in the present moment. We can't discover divine presence. We can't show up to any place other than now, and that gets very difficult sometimes when we have a busy life. It's very easy when we're sitting in church and that's all we're talking about, or if we're in a class and we're talking about being present now. But when you're at work and there's demands, or there's demands of your family, or there's someone in trouble, that our mind just starts going and we try to fix something out there. And what we want to recognize is that the power is in here. You know, there's one spiritual teacher, Joel Goldsmith, who actually didn't propose just meditating, doing a long meditation in the morning and then you're done. His view is that you do 5-minute meditations all day long. And so he didn't do one long meditation. He just said, just keep returning to those 5 minutes of meditation all day to remind ourselves where the power is. Because constantly, when we have so much coming at us, the news, I mean, we're in such a high political season, that's on everywhere. The fears that come up around that. And then we have our own life, that there's so many things going on. And then there's the environment. There's so many things coming at us all the time. To know that the only power is in this moment, and I can access it. And this is why Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, is so brilliantly powerful. That even people who are reading the book, as they're reading it, they're feeling the power, because the reading brings you into the present over and over and over and over again. He's not talking about God. It's a brilliant book because he doesn't use any spiritual languaging. But basically he's talking direct contact with God can only be in the now. I had a friend who was reading The Power of Now and practicing mindfulness meditation. And mindfulness meditation is when we are watching ourselves. We're just aware. We're mindful of our words, our actions, everything that we're doing, everything that's happening in the room. It's always sort of this ever-present witness. So he was being in this ever-present witness, being in the power of now. And he said, my life moved without me making it move. That's when we move into grace. I was at a job. It was okay. He liked it. But he was in the environmental water business. Next thing he knew, it was taking him to Cambodia and Thailand, and he loved that travel. And then they offered him a job, so he ended up living there for a while. And he was living this life of bliss. And he said, I didn't plan any of it. I didn't have a 5-year plan. I just kept living in the now. I just kept walking in the yes of every moment, being present. And my life just unfolded before me. And I just kept saying yes, and I didn't have any future plan either. And that's how he's really learned to live his life, is in the now, where we know God. The power and the presence of pure spirit is now, and it's personal to us when we show up to it. It's always here. It's here now. But the question is, are we showing up to our awareness of it within us? I took this workshop. That was probably one of the most powerful workshops I ever had. And we didn't ever meditate or pray. We didn't close our eyes once. We were asked to sit in a circle. And we were given a paragraph that was basically about the creative process. I think most of you have taken Foundations, the creative process. And so it was just a paragraph explaining the creative process. And we were asked to talk about it for the next hour. But the rules were, we were not allowed to refer to any book we had read. We were not allowed to refer to any past experience we had. We could not talk about it like an analysis. We could only talk as it, now, in the present tense. I can't refer to past knowledge. I can't refer to past experience. Only now, in this moment, talk about the creative process. It was very difficult at first. We didn't know what to say. How do you talk as creative process? So there was a couple false starts. And suddenly these words would come out, and they're almost nonsensical because you're not talking about it. You're not analyzing it. You're just being oneness, speaking as creativity. And so if you just listened to the dialogue for the next hour, it would have not been that exciting because we were just speaking in a sort of non-linear as oneness and just little phrases. But as we spoke as oneness, I was experiencing, and I only knew 2 people, not very well, but there were people in that group. Suddenly the energy started going, it was just flipping around the room. And I was in a state of bliss for 3 days after that. Bliss, just pure joy. Just speaking as oneness. What we find is that when we're present, the more we do mindfulness, we're going to experience more and more joy, a lightness of being, because we're not so attached to all the smallness. We're experiencing the infinite nature of God. The infinite nature of God is bliss. The infinite nature of God is love. I was telling some class on Thursday night, I have you've seen my picture of the laughing Jesus, and how annoying it is. Because when I'm in a really bad mood or I'm really upset, it just sits there and laughs at me the whole time. Just like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, but I'm serious. You got, and there is that level. It's not to have no compassion, no English. It's not to not have compassion for the pain or whatever we're going through, but not to get lost in it. And not to get lost in it is to come from the infinite perspective. The infinite perspective is never afraid. It's not in pain. It's not confused. It's not frightened for me. It's not worried that my life is over. It's not worried that I'm the worst person ever. It doesn't have any of those fears, so it doesn't get all constricted. I get constricted. It doesn't. So the more I can feel that presence witnessing me, I show up to that infinite presence within me. It's personal, and I can start to feel the lightness. I can start letting it go and not be so attached. But I'll say here's been a challenge with me with this process. When we hear about being in the now, so for a long time I didn't like Vipassana meditation. I did a lot of other types of meditation. Vipassana is mindfulness meditation. Witnessing when we witness. I do a lot of other types of meditation, but I didn't like it because it also felt a little distant. And I didn't like that distance. Like I could feel the freedom, I could feel the joy, but I like the emotion too. I'm like, I miss that. I don't want to just feel like so detached where I'm so free from everything that I miss the human experience, the feeling and the emotion. So I kind of resisted this type of meditation because I wanted to feel things. And what I finally realized is that, many things, but one of the main things was I kept learning that being in the now only meant me now. And so it felt very detached from the rest of my life. And I was told, when, not by a teacher, by a friend, who very much was in the now, kept saying, you're too attached to your family, you're too attached to all this in the past, just let it go, be it now. And I did, but it started to feel really empty to me. And it's almost so this workshop that I did where we only spoke as one and we didn't talk about the books that we read or we didn't talk about past experiences. I understand that and that's beautiful, but it also can cut us off. So the same teacher who led that workshop has now stepped down because though he could get to people to a place of bliss, the way we got to bliss, I only did it for a workshop, people lived in his ashram, is to cut yourself off from your individual identity. Just be oneness. And you couldn't have your own individual expression or your memories or your history or your feelings. And what I think one of the most important concepts that I've learned is transcend and include. That it's not transcend and exclude. We don't just be in the now and exclude the past. And that's where I was wrong. I thought being in the now, being fully present meant that the past didn't exist in me, good and bad. And once I started being able to be fully present in the moment, but that included all my history, the part that was hurtful, the part that was loving, all of it, it included all of it, was just never limited to it. There is no past precedent in the present, but it still includes, transcend and include. It includes all that we are, but it's not limited. So that started to bring a fullness to my experience of the present moment. Like I just wasn't Harriet devoid of a past. I wasn't just like this being that had no history or no story or no soul, but it included all of that, but was never limited to that. And then I started to feel the fullness of being able to enjoy the power and the presence of spirit and be my human self, but not limited to my human self. And that became even more, has become, it continues to be, a deeper realization of how to experience the power of presence now, but includes all that I am. Does that make sense to what I'm saying there? So it's not just freedom, but it's fulfillment. I was feeling, it was easy for me to get to freedom, but I was having a hard time with the fulfillment part. But if I started working with fulfillment, I started to feel constricted. So I've been working with, and I still am, of how to have freedom and fulfillment simultaneously. To fulfill the fulfillment of being a human being and having all these experiences, but not constricted by them, not limited by them, not in bondage to them. And for me, that's what we're working on constantly. As we are the center, it is impossible for us ever to leave the center of spirit in our own lives. We can never walk away. It is always that where we are. I mean, I've definitely had I had experience once where I was talking to someone and I was inside of them looking at me. That was weird. But that only lasts for a second. And it was still in relationship to me. Like I was still looking at me. You may have had dreams where you're flying but it's always in relation to me. Then I come back to me. I can have experiences where I'm in expanded states of consciousness beyond body, mind, but it's still in relationship to me. The same is true for you. Everyone in this room, there's only one power, one presence, but you can never leave your experience from you. So there's no invitation to work on this week because it's just who we are. It's just to be aware of that which already exists. That everything that you're experiencing right now, from as you leave here today, you're going to leave with your experience, your spiritual experience. No one else is responsible for it. No one else can tell you what it is. It's your direct contact, no intermediaries. You are the source and the power of your spiritual experience. It is personal. God is infinite and eternal. It is always already love unconditionally for all beings, but it is personal to you and your own story, your own relationship with that divine presence within, through, and as you. And I love what Reverend Michael said in the reading today. When we really start to realize that, we talk to it in our own language of our heart, and it talks back to us too in our own language of our heart. So whatever my spiritual journey is with like freedom and fulfillment that I just shared, that's been my own interior dialogue relationship with the divine within me. It will be different for each of you, but it will be yours. It does not belong to anybody else. It does not belong to a philosophy, an organization, or a teacher. It is yours. There is no intermediary. God is your life. It is your direct experience. You can never have anyone else's experience you don't walk around with anyone else's experience but yours. You're always the center of your own experience. So I just ask you, my invitation is just to be aware. Be aware all week long that God is at the center of your being. You are the source, the power within you. So if you're at work and everything's coming at you and you have deadlines, see if you can stop for a minute and recognize that there's only one power. See, we go back to that one power. There's only one power, and it's inside of me now. Only one power, and just sit there and then move to the next stop, or then go to the phone call that you have to make or the meeting you have to make. One power. Not two powers, not their power, not my boss's power, my client's power, my parents' power, my children's power, money's power, relationship power, health power. Only one power, and that power is in me now. It's in you now. It will always be that too. It will never change. Be aware and find the joy and the power and the freedom of your personal